Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
We are going to start in a few minutes because people are still entering the meeting. Okay, we're waiting maybe another minute and then we will start. And it's great to see so many people here. All right, I would suggest that we get started. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming here today. We are very excited to have you, and a very warm welcome on behalf of the whole DPI Safeguards Initiative, the Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies, and also the UNDP. The colleagues are also here in this call today. Yeah, today, Francesco, if we could go to the next slide. Today we are looking forwards to giving you some insights into the 2025 plans for the DPI Safeguards Initiative. As you're all aware, we are currently receiving nominations for the 2025 working groups. And as part of today's agenda, we just want to give you a quick overview of the DPI Safeguards Initiative, the assets that the initiative developed over the past year, and to then also speak about what the plans for 2025 are and what you as potential working group members would be working on. And then we also have a brief segment where we will hear from some of the working group members whom we worked with in 2024. And we're going to wrap up the session with a Q&A where you will also have the possibility to ask any questions that you may have. Before we get started, I just briefly want to give you an overview whom we are speaking to today. So as I said, this is a partnership between the UNDP and the Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies. And as such, from our UNDP partners today here, we have Raja Chandrasekharan, who's the project lead for the Safeguards Initiative at UNDP. I think also our colleague Naveen from UNDP is also there, who focuses on the in-country implementations of the initiative. On the ODET side, my colleague Francesco Stabilito, who's our project manager for the initiative, is also on this call and has the and he also has his come around, so you can see him. And my colleague Toby Toby, was our senior analyst here at ODET, also part of this call here today. Before we get started, we just wanted to get a quick overview whom we are speaking to today. So there are a few QR codes here, and we want to get a bit of a feel of where you are dialing in from, whom you work for, and what sector you work with. So we're going to have a brief segment here that is going to be interactive. Yeah, so you can just take out your mobile phones and scan the QR codes, and we'll have an idea of whom we are speaking to today as well. There's a QR code in the bottom left. You should all be able to see the screen. You can, if you have any problems, please feel free to use the chat. Okay, I see it's working. That is great. So quite a few people dialing in from the US. See Guatemala, Colombia. It's nice to have good participation from the Latin American countries. See Ghana here, Sri Lanka, Korea, Australia, Macedonia, interesting. Kenya. And of course, some Indian colleagues. Okay, it's great to see that we are a very global group here. Representation from all continents. Okay, that's great. Yeah, it's one of our priorities that also the working group cohort is going to be diverse in terms of regional representation, in terms of the perspectives that you all bring in. Yeah, so that is all very great to see. Francesco, could you go to the next question? So we're also interested in learning which stakeholder group do you primarily work with. You may be aware we want the DPI Safeguards Framework to be useful for all stakeholder groups that work on digital public infrastructure. Yeah, and therefore we are very happy if this is ideally also a diverse group who comes from many responsible authorities. I'm seeing that we have strong civil society representation here in academia. That is always very great to see. Some government representatives, 8 people from multilateral development agencies, technology providers, and also solid private sector participation. That's very great to hear. Francesco, could you move to the next question? Yeah, now before we start talking about the DPI Safeguards Initiative, we would like to have an idea, how engaged have you been with us so far? Just so we know at what level of detail we will explain everything. So, like, did you perhaps participate in some of the deep dives that we did, provide input, or even were a working group member, did a convening with us? Okay, and I'm seeing we have an interesting distribution here, with some people being completely new to it and in need of a deep dive. So we'll do our very best to do that over the next 50 minutes. Some people being involved on and off. And yeah, some also here who were very actively engaged. So we have the whole spectrum. It's if you are unclear, if anything is unclear after the webinar and you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. We are there to answer any questions that you may have. All right. So now we're going to start talking about the DPI Safeguards Initiative, and to give you a bit of an overview. So as you'll be aware that in the past years, DPI has been getting increasing attention globally, and yeah, there were some big milestones there. For example, the Indian G20 presidency, and the whole topic of the DPI Safeguards Initiative really was kicked off by the UN Secretary General's policy brief for the Global Digital Compact. So what the Secretary General saw is that many countries are increasing their investments in society-wide digital shared systems. But he also acknowledged that they have this massive potential to leapfrog development, but they also come with many inherent risks, such as mass surveillance or the intentional or unintentional exclusion of vulnerable groups, but also things like cybersecurity risks. So in his policy brief for the Global Digital Compact, the Secretary General called for the creation of common frameworks that could be used as a reference point for all stakeholders in the ecosystem work on digital public infrastructure. And based on this call for common frameworks, together with the UNDP, the Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies, created the DPI Safeguards Initiative. That was in September 2023. And then around last year, around this time, we created the first working group cohort to develop the first iteration of the DPI Safeguards Framework. And I will talk in a bit about what this looks like. But we presented the first version. We launched the first version of the framework 1 year later during last year's UN General Assembly. This is what you see here at the bottom right. And another key milestone is that through the adoption of the Global Digital Compact, digital public infrastructure is also part of the GDC. In objective number 1, the UN member states commit to increasing investments into DPI and also commit to making sure DPI is safeguarded. Maybe one word or two on the Global Digital Compact for those of you who are new to those conversations. So the Global Digital Compact is a UN member state agreement on the principles and values that underlie the global digital transformation. And yeah, this is part of the Pact for the Future, which was adopted last year in September during the UN General Assembly, which lays out the vision for a revitalized multilateral system. You can find more information on the website of the UN Tech Envoy, and I'll after I'm done speaking, post a few links about this in the chat as well. Just could you go to the next slide, please? I just want to say a few words on how the partnership of the DPI Safeguards Initiative works. So it's a partnership. We orchestrate the initiative together with the UNDP, but we also work way beyond just UNDP and the UN Secretariat. We work with the entire multilateral system and with all international organizations on this. But overall, this is a very symbiotic relationship that we have, because on the one hand, we have a more political platform, and we lend the Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies, for instance, lends the convening power of the UN Secretariat to the initiative. And the UNDP, with its experience in-country implementation, really brings that rootedness on experiences in the ground into the initiative. Some of you, Francisco, if you could go to the next slide. Some of you may have interacted with ODET, the predecessor organization to the Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies. But as of January this year, ODET has transitioned into OSET. Also, that is part of the Global Digital Compact. And I just want to make 2 points on this. So the role of the new Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies is to serve as a focal point for digital cooperation for the entire multi-stakeholder ecosystem, and to support the implementation of the Global Digital Compact. And part of that is also, as I said before, the DPI Safeguards Initiative. Next slide, please. I want to take just a few words to speak about things that the working groups during the past year produced, and there are two main deliverables that were created. So number one is the DPI Safeguards Framework. So if you did not yet have a look at it, you can just scan the QR code or go to the DPI Safeguards website and you can navigate it. So what the DPI Safeguards Framework is, it's basically a tool that we want to be usable for any stakeholder in the DPI ecosystem. And through that tool, which you can access through the QR code, you can generate recommendations or extract recommendations that fit your specific circumstance. So you can filter by systems, by principles that you want to uphold, so that depending on who you are and what the context is that you operate in, you get the knowledge that is relevant for you. To get a bit up to speed on what the initiative does in more detail, you can also take a look at the guide to the DPI Safeguards Framework. There's a bit more detail on how the assets were developed, and it provides also a bit of a summary of how to use the framework and what the thinking underlying the framework is. Next slide, please. To give you an idea of what the next year will look like, I just want us to take a brief look at what the past year looked like and what the co-creation process for the DPI Safeguards Framework worked like. So last year we recruited 44 working group members who met on a almost weekly basis to develop the recommendations for the DPI Safeguards Framework. But it was not only that. We also worked with a wider network of international organizations to ensure this is not only that this is not a siloed approach, but that this is inclusive and reflects the needs of all international organizations. And through UNDP, we also closely engaged with the needs of partner countries, and we had 12 country engagements in that context. We also did a variety, 13 in total, of public consultations and convenings. Some of you may have seen that. So for instance, we were present in different forums across the world and workshopped parts of the DPI Safeguards Framework. Next slide, please. I want to give you a quick high-level perspective on what the building blocks for the strategy of 2025 are. So for 2025, we will focus on two main things. And this, you see this here, we have the global track and the local track. So now that we have a DPI Safeguards Framework, the focus will be to mainstream the topic of safeguards and the DPI Safeguards Framework across the entire ecosystem. So we are looking to partner with organizations so they include the DPI Safeguards Framework in their strategies, in their assessments. And we do this with other UN organizations, but also with other technical providers, bilateral TA providers, civil society organizations, private sector organizations, etc. And then we also have the local track led by UNDP, where the DPI Safeguards Framework is implemented at the in-country level. What is most relevant here for the working groups is that the working groups for 2025 will support in creating the next iteration of the DPI Safeguards Framework. The DPI Safeguards Framework is never complete. The topic is an evolving one. And we are already aware that there are some issues that we are probably not covering to the extent that we could, and this is what we want to do for 2025. Also, there will be additional implementation resources. So, for instance, the question was raised: what does compliance with the framework actually look like? And it will be the working groups will be working on those topics as well. All right. That's it from my side, and now I'm handing over to my colleague to speak about the deliverables of the 2025 cohort in more detail.
Thank you, Moritz. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to just pick up from where my colleague Moritz left off and speak a little bit about some of the ideas we have about the deliverables for 2025 for the working groups. So after the framework was released in September 2025, we received some public feedback And we engaged, in discussions with the broader ecosystem, our partners, in different sort of stakeholders, civil society organizations, governments, technology providers. And really, we were looking to understand what the practical steps that were needed to adopt a mainstream DPI safeguard. So we have the framework, and the next step really is to ensure that when DPI is implemented, that the safeguards are implemented in step with DPI. So some of the questions that we got from our stakeholders were, what does compliance with DPI safeguards entail? And the question really is not so much about saying, oh, if you don't comply with safeguards. It's just if we want to do this practically, what does that mean? If we want to commit to this as technology providers, if we want to commit to this as government, what does that really entail? Because we have this excellent resource that provides principles, that we have practice and recommendations that are tied to our principles of, do not include, do not exclude, data privacy by design, practice inclusive government, and we have some practices and recommendations that are tied to these recommendations. We have some practices and recommendations that are aimed at mitigating certain risks, the risks of exclusion and discrimination. But if we want to say that we're doing this, what does that look like for me as a stakeholder? So this was one of the questions that kept coming up in our discussions with the ecosystem. A second question was, what measurable criteria or assessment resource can be used to measure safety and inclusive elements of DPI? So again, this is okay if we say that we have safeguards implemented, for example, or we're looking to it, what can we measure against? And we're not really looking just to measure, oh, is something installed technologically? No, we're looking to measure the impact on people, right? So how do we say that? How do we measure that even some of these practices and processes we're implementing, that it is increasing inclusiveness, that it is ensuring that women and girls have access to are able to access some of these digital technologies? How do we say, for example, that all the different ethnic groups in society are able to access DPI systems? So it's sort of trying to understand practically, when we go to implement safeguards, how can we measure our work? Another feedback we've received, like my colleague already said, is that the framework, we already knew. The idea was the framework will forever, but will be evolving, right? Things change, technology moves really fast. And as new technology is coming, there will be, new risks, and we have to continue to safeguard against those risks. So what are the additions that are needed to address some of the gaps that we can already see? For example, we already have governments talking about interoperability, for example, of identity systems. What are the safeguards we have with that? So we have some feedback saying we looked at the framework, and we can see maybe that we don't maybe see sufficient practices or recommendations for cybersecurity. So a key question we've been asking is, okay, we can already see there's some gaps. How can we address these gaps, right? And what are the key themes for this year that we want to address? Because of course, the expectation is not that it's complete by the end of this year, but moving into this year, what are the key themes? What are the key areas that we think we need to address, that we can prioritize to make sure that the framework is effective and applicable to anyone that's using it? And finally, if another key question we're getting is from our civil society partners, and even from implementers, who are saying, is there some guidance that exists for building and acting on these recommendations, right? How can we, if I'm a civil society organization, and maybe I want to hold my government accountable, is there some guidance that shows me how I can use the framework to accomplish that? Right? If I'm a DPI program manager and I want to implement safeguard, is there something that says how to get started? I have so many things I'm doing. I really want to do this, but is there some guidance that can show me how I can get started on implementing safeguards? So these are the key questions that we have, based on like the discussions that we have, that we're going to prioritize, and that we're going to ask the working groups to help us answer in 2025. So can we move to the next slide, please? So the scope of work, like I said, based on the questions that we've received, is really to refine and develop the DPI Safeguards Framework further, to create additional knowledge products. And I've said knowledge products means, the essentially answers. What are the resources that we can create to answer those questions that supports the real need of the DPI ecosystem just now? So do we create, a compliance resource, or some resource that shows people how they can implement DPIs? What kind of assessment or KPI resource can we expand upon? We already have something in the annex that makes it straightforward and easy for people to assess safety and inclusiveness when DPIs are implemented and when safeguards are put in place. And also, we are currently the local track, like we said, is sort of working on implementing DPI safeguards in certain countries right now. So what if they have some practical issues, maybe data privacy? There's a data privacy issue in, I don't know, Nigeria, for example. Can we, as a group, provide some practical targeted guidance on a specific use case basis? And some of this, I'm just going to maybe walk through, just before we move to that, I'm just going to walk through maybe some of the ways that we work, right, that the working groups work from last year, maybe this year. So for example, for some of these questions, the ideas, the way we would do it would be to have brainstorming sessions or ideation sessions where, the working groups work together and, think about the challenges, the questions that we have, and begin to especially based on the experience, based on the expertise you've had, based on the different views, the diverse views from the different stakeholders that make up the working group, we start to think about how we can solve these problems, right? And then from that might involve, some research, some background work, based on some of the work you've already done, or based on some, some work that may be out there, or some experience that you have. And then we also sort of move from there. When we have maybe a few solutions, we can move from there into sharing with other working group members so that we can receive some feedback on the work we've done. And then we move to sort of a phase of actually proposing recommendations that we then finalize, and then we produce as the initiative. So these are the sort of steps that we go through: ideation, brainstorming, research to back that up, a first presentation to other working group members and other teams, other working groups to get some feedback. And then we go into a finalization stage where we then sort of produce this report. So this is sort of the process of sort of producing deliverables that we have. And throughout the year, we will, produce, like we say, deliverables that answer some of these questions. So that will be a framework, a new version of the framework, the additional knowledge products that we've mentioned. So we're going to have a Q&A afterwards. I know it's a lot of information, and if you have any questions, please put it in the chat or in the Mentimeter that we're going to share. For the next agenda item, we're going to hear from two of our 2024 working group members, and they would just speak to you a little bit about their experience. So there's some real life experience here. So Maria, if you want to go first.
Thanks, Toby. Happy to. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the entire Safeguards team for all the amazing work that they've been doing. This huge task they have been taking on. So my background, I have a legal background, sociology of law, and I've been contributing with discussions around participatory, collective, inclusive governance around DPI. And this last year, I participated as part of the organization working group facilitated by the brilliant Raja. and we discussed the roles of different entities in DPI governance. I would say my main takeaways from this experience has been, the whole different stakeholders dialogue. I think, I come from civil society and advocacy and research, so engaging with people from from other sectors has been very rich and an amazing learning opportunity. I think both in terms of material, in terms of learning their practical experiences, working on the ground, but also reflecting on my own role within discussions, and how I perceive advocacy and research and engagement on this topic. I think it's an amazing opportunity for CSOs to reflect on that now. I think the DPI conversation needs a different kind of engagement, as I've been used to with data protection laws in Brazil, as I've been used to engage with big techs. I think it kind of needs that kind of reflection. So it's been amazing to learn and to reflect that into my own work. And also give me a better understanding about the field of DPI and what is missing and all the gaps. I think, Toby already brought some amazing contributions to that, but also in terms of who is within the conversation, who do we need to bring to the conversation to focus on, impact, to focus on people lived experiences in diversity and inclusion. So yeah, I encourage you to engage both with the initiative and with the topic. We definitely need you to move forward with the conversation. I hope you don't feel scared about the fancy wording of the open call. Let's just try to move past this whole, neoliberal institutional credentialism and focus on what we can bring to the table. I think every citizen, every person that uses DPI systems can and should contribute to the conversation, and also help to nudge the safeguards team to do an even better job that they have already been doing. So yeah, and if you guys need to talk more about it, want to hear more about it, I'm super available. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria. Costa.
I'm Costa Peric, at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Thank you so much. I was part of the technical team in the 2024. It kind of makes sense. I'm a technologist and lead at the Gates Foundation the work on payment, DPI deployments. So it made a lot of sense for me to be part of that technical team. I was co-chair, and we worked essentially first on putting together the life cycle. What is the life cycle of a DPI deployment, all the way from envisioning all the way to operation? Because that was kind of an important skeleton, if I can say, a framework, backbone on which we can then hook different recommendations, because each of these phases involves quite different stakeholders and hence quite different interests. And at the beginning, it's more about designing the system to be inclusive, while as the project progresses, it's more about making sure that it's safe, secure, operationally available, so that it can serve people in the best way. The experience was very interesting at the beginning. You meet a totally new team, and the beginning is a little bit chaotic to make sense of this all, but the team at UNDP was super helpful to answer our questions. So don't hesitate to ask them and to ask the other teams, to try to, at the beginning, make sense of what really needs to be done. And then it's kind of like a series of sprints, kind of intense background work. We worked a lot, of course, on shared documents. And then we had very important meetings with the UNDP team and then the whole team together to essentially align our work. So kind of like sprints of deep, intense background work, followed with intense discussions and taking feedback and then incorporating. So very exciting. I was thrilled, honored, excited to be part of this and to see the great results and the great impact this is, and very glad to hand over to a new team for more work on this. So as Maria said, don't hesitate to reach out for any questions as well to me. Thank you very much. Back to you, Toby.
Thank you so much, Costa. So I think right now we're just going to quickly move on to just sharing some information about how you can submit your nominations. And then after that, we'll move on to Q&A. Francesco?
Yes, thank you, Toby, and thank you, Costa and Maria, for sharing their experience. So here, just quickly, some key information about this current call for nomination for 2025. You will find all the information what we'll be talking about today on the website. So if you go to dpisafeguard.com, you can also download the detailed TORs for the 2025 cohort. Remembering that you can nominate yourself or somebody that you know to be part of the working groups for this year. And the nomination will close on January 21st. So there's one more week to go. And this time, please go to the website, read the TOR, and submit your nominations. I think we can move now to the Q&A. We might see some technical issue on the Q&A on Teams, so feel free to use the Mentimeters or the chat. And maybe Costa and Maria, also, if you can stay with us for a few minutes, maybe there will be some questions for you. Thank you. So I don't know if there's already some question. So to the Mentimeter, let me go. Okay, you can use also this QR code to share any question. Also, in the meantime, if our colleagues from UNDP, if you would like to add something, feel free. Okay, I see there's one question from Vijoy Pasu. So what is the time commitment expected? Are meetings scheduled on weekends or work days? As we have also official work, of course. Will be any travel involved? So who wants to take this question?
I'll just take them. I'll just start answering them as they come, and then maybe I can direct the questions to Costa or Maria if there's any for them. Okay, so how long were the working groups for 2025, and sort of the timeline to select, and then I'll just do that. Okay, so the expected the working groups will start. The expected timeline is to start in March. And end in December. So it's supposed to be about, I would say 10 months for that. And the timeline to select is we hope to finish the selection process by the end of February. So once the nomination closes next week, we plan to review and then sort of send out, do complete a revision process, a selection process, and then we'll send out sort of the invitations by then. And what are the expected number of working groups this year? Working group members, we're not quite sure, because what happens is, of course, we have sort of a number of sort of requirements that we try to make. We want a geographical spread. We want to have a balance for different stakeholders. We want to also ensure that we have, a good gender balance as well. So that might affect the numbers that we get, but we'll be looking anywhere between, I would say, maybe 15 and 30 for the working groups. So it might be less or it might be more, but somewhere in between those numbers. Does the participation of the working groups involve travel? It may, depending. So in the last year, we had a meeting with our co-chairs and our chief rapporteurs in New York, and and even though we might desire to have everyone meet, it depends on. Sometimes we have budget constraints, but it's definitely possible, and we usually plan to have it. So yeah. So I'll just look at another group of questions and see if I can take them. So I see a couple of here about the selection criteria for the working groups, what experience or background is required. And I think I would just say, we typically look for some experience in, experience in DPI as maybe a civil society, as a government worker, as a technology provider, as a researcher is important, but also not just DPI, right? But experience in, inclusion, in working with, like I say, inclusion, some technical expertise as well in maybe privacy, some legal expertise. So what matters is that anyone that's had any sort of work experience or even passion in the areas of digital public infrastructure, but also large digital implementations. But this doesn't always have to be, like I said, a digital sort of maybe implementation. Also with maybe legal frameworks for passing, laws on privacy, laws on inclusion, and anything like that. So those are the kind of sort of background we're looking for. And maybe I'll ask maybe Moritz and Raji to add to that.
Toby, I want to take one question, which is on the chat, which is asked by Kate Wilson. It says,
Raji,
how are you
we can't
building
hear
on?
you. Or could other people hear her? Maybe it was just me.
Yeah, we can hear you, Raji. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was very confused. Thank you. Kate, your question on whether we're building on top of the ecosystems work. You would have seen last year that we are trying to unify this as a universal set of principles and practices from across the ecosystem. There'll be even more deeper work this year. DIAL is one of them that we'll be working with very closely. There are other players in the ecosystem that we are shortlisting to work with in 2025. That will be the objective of the global track. We want this to exist in the context of the ecosystem so that both civil society and the government implementers or the other three personas that we have shortlisted for safeguards do not see this as a competing work that they need to consume. So we are in conversations bilaterally with other multilateral and organizations to see how they can also bake this into their products and strategies. So Moritz can talk more about it if you have further questions.
Yeah, I just want to add a few things. So like on the roles, responsibilities, and yeah, maybe on the amount of work that this requires. So I also saw one question about the seniority. We covered a wide array of levels of experience in the working group members. So we had everything from people like who were like a Secretary of State for government to PhD research. So it's not only the highest, like very, 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 very senior people. On the roles and responsibilities, so we expect people to show up to the working group meetings and to contribute to the work. So there are deliverables that will be produced, and for example, like if you will be part of a group that develops the compliance resource that Toby talks about, then we expect people to also carry their way there. The different roles that we had last time, we had working group members, and then each working group had a chair. We are still thinking about what this will look like in detail for this year. Last time we also had a steering committee, but yeah, there we have not yet. We don't fully know yet what this will look like for this year. And maybe, Maria and Costa, if you can say a few words on the time that you spent with this. We I think that's probably the most reliable indicator.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Moritz. I think we had a few different deliverables with timelines, with deadlines for them. So I think it varied throughout the year. There are years where we're going to have, weekly meetings to exchange ideas, to, catch up. And there are periods where we have, to focus on those deliverables. I would say, my business week were 15 hours of dedication, a voluntary dedication. But again, it varied throughout the year, depending on the deliverables. And again, for this year's, I believe the deliverables will be different, considering the work of updating the current framework. But yeah, I think it's manageable.
Costa, do you want to add anything? Oh, we can't hear you, Costa. Are you speaking? Oh,
Thing can't make the system work. Costa, why don't you leave your views on the chat and we will troubleshoot.
okay. Yeah, I don't know. I can't hear you, Costa. So maybe I'll just take another question and then continue. So I see a question here on given that the scope of DPI is still evolving, will development of safeguards adopt a specific definition? And then currently, this is one of the questions, we sort of grappled with as the initiative in the beginning. And what we've tried to do is really adopt sort of a broad definition of DPI based on the different proposals that we've seen in the ecosystem, right? We had some from we've had CDPI, we had G20, we had UNDP. So we've had some different people, organizations, I think even DPG, propose some definitions. And we just took, a broad definition to ensure that we include even systems that started out not as DPI, but have evolved into DPI. So for example, we have civil registration systems that are evolving into DPI now. So and that are being used, as digital public infrastructure. So to ensure that we don't leave some of these systems behind, that even though traditionally will not be considered as DPI, but now are considered as DPI, it's one of the reasons why we adopted a broad definition. And the idea is that there's no definition that is static, right? As you say, as DPI continues to evolve, it may be that we have to expand it further, especially as maybe the interconnector, begins to be more interconnectedness with AI and things like that. So the description, so we essentially have a description of DPI as opposed to a definition of DPI, and that will evolve as as the field and technology changes.
Can I take that question which says what is the criteria to be chosen?
So I think I've
Toby,
do you have a question, Raji? Do you want to continue, say something? Please go ahead.
Yes. I want to take the question which says, seems like only a few people are being selected. People starting out have no chance. We have observed last year, and given what you've just heard, that it is still an evolving space, a small but growing set of people are the ones which are engaged very regularly on this. Yes, like Toby spoke about, we will ensure that there is geographical representation, there is a representation from all different stakeholders, whether it is civil society, government authorities, regulators, funders, multilateral agencies, we will look for that representation. There's also expertise that we will look at. But what we have seen last year is we had a huge amount of applications. We have seen that they have continued to engage as advocates and community members with us. They join us in convenings, they join us for webinars, they get to know what is taking place, and they continue to write to us very actively. So I would request that you please nominate yourself, but please don't be disheartened if you're not chosen. Everything is built transparently on our website or the resources hub. You can always write to us and hear what is happening and continue to champion for us. We are looking at more community building on the resources hub, and you will hear shortly from us through March, April on how we can have dialogues going over there too.
Raji, let me just add to what you just said. I just want to also say that as part of the convenings that we have, we really look to take public feedback that is provided to the working groups that informs the recommendations and the proposals that they make. So there is a way, if you have ideas, if you have proposals and recommendations, that it can be fed into the working groups. We usually have online forms for some of the assets and some of the work we've produced. But what we really do at the convenings that we go to is that we usually have workshops where we present some of the work that the working groups are already doing for public feedback, for and we take this and we take it back into the working group. So like Raji said, even if you're not selected as part of the core, and it is a small group, we know that we're going to leave out some excellent candidates, people with experience, people with excellent ideas, but we still want those ideas. We still want you to be part of the initiative. So when we come to a convening near you, that's a chance to participate in person. That's a chance, to sit on a workshop, but also as we also still take feedback, even from online webinars and also online forms that we feed directly to the working group members as part of the feedback that they use to develop the deliverables that we have. So I just wanted to add that.
There is a question, if you can hear
So
me,
yes,
on
I
what was
think
the biggest.
Raji wants to say something.
Raji, do you want to say something?
I think you should take this question. What has been the biggest learning moments from 2024 regarding the adoption of DPI safeguards? I would request Moritz or Toby to answer, then I can add my perspective. I'm just quickly collecting my thoughts. It's from Ott.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there are different levels to a comprehensive answer to this question. So I think number one, from like starting at the high level and working ourselves down to the local level, I think the biggest learning is that this cannot, like the Safeguards Initiative cannot be a siloed effort, and that we have to very actively work with the entire ecosystem to ensure a broad-based adoption. And when I talked about our strategy very briefly, we do have that global track where the focus is on mainstreaming the DPI Safeguards Framework, and how we are doing this is by creating partnerships with specific with other international organizations to support them in including and referencing the DPI Safeguards Framework in their strategies. Because if something like this is referenced in the global strategy, then this will permeate into, say, like a local project assessment. So if you get a large organization to say we reference the DPI Safeguards Framework in our global strategy, then this may be reflected in any assessment that they do before a local project. So I think this is the number one learning for how we think about like mainstreaming and promote adoption at a system level. And I think to talk more about the local level, I'm handing this over to Raji.
Thank you, Moritz, for that. Ott, one of the biggest things from November of last year to now, we've been talking to government implementers in countries, civil society organizations in countries. We see them in opposite ends of the spectrum, and they come together to make safeguards work in a country. One of the big learnings that we have had as we've spoke to like over 20 countries is one size doesn't fit all. And there are issues of geographies, countries have different levels of capability, capacity, skills, understanding of DPI. So it needs to be slightly nuanced on how they adopt safeguards. There are also, like Moritz spoke about, we spoke to different organizations, and some of them have said it also varies by topic. Women in safeguards, financial inclusion in safeguards, stateless and refugees in safeguards. So there is different nuance that we need to add. And there is also different personas. So civil society feedback has been this is too nuanced for us. So you need to bring it down 2 levels lower so that we know step by step how to take this forward. Otherwise, you're giving us a brilliant piece of work like the framework, but we need the steps. All of this feedback has gone in, and those are all the ways that we have broken down the questions that Toby spoke about and said, okay, could we think of how the program manager of the government and the civil society organization will use it differently? So a persona-based view, a topic-based view, which Toby probably touched on and said, okay, we need to deepen the framework. There are gaps in it. And then what does adoption or compliance to safeguards mean? And it could mean different things from different personas or geography perspectives. So these are the various things that we have heard and are at least the big moment as we worked with countries towards implementation. And we have tried to bring this back into the 2025 working group. Over to you, Toby.
Okay, I think we've come to time. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's taken the time to attend this webinar. I hope it's been insightful, and I hope it's helped you make a decision to apply or to, get involved with the Safeguards Initiative, in another way. So we look forward to receiving your applications. We look forward to meeting you at, different convenings and events for DPI Safeguards, and we look forward to your contributions. So I hope if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach out to us at DPI Safeguards. You can find out some information at dpisafeguards.org. On our website, we have the framework, we have the assets that we developed last year, and we also have an email address, DPI UN at DPI Safeguards, that you can also reach out to us at. I don't know, Francesco, if you can please just put that maybe in the chat. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely